What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we have a GFCT Q&A for Game Week 6. I'm here with Ajit Dillon, the founder of GFCT, and Sham, who is also a member like me. So we'll start off with the first question. Now, this question comes from me, and I want to ask Sham about his wildcard because he did wildcard last week, and I know he's a smart guy, and I want to know his plans for the future and why exactly he decided to press the wildcard button. So, Sham, feel free to discuss anything you'd like.
Sure. You have a bit of time in hand, right?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't let's do something? While I was discussing my wild card, Ajit was mentioning that, hey, why don't I document out my thoughts while the wild card was going on, while I was like preparing through the 2 game weeks. Why don't I document my thoughts about the wild card? So I had done that. So why don't let me just bring that up? And I have actually created a PowerPoint. Unfortunately, MBA types, we do PowerPoints for a living. So really apologize, but why don't let us have a PowerPoint for me to just walk through and just talk through a few things that I was thinking about while I had gone through my wildcard. Can I go ahead and share my screen? If that
Yep.
is okay with you?
I've made you full screen in the terrible video quality way where everybody just saw my video software, but we're just going through it. Yes.
Right. Can you see my screen at this moment? Tell me if you can. Whenever you can, I will.
Okay, I can't yet.
Okay. Tell me if you can now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go for it. So okay. So I'll walk through my wild card and I'll walk through my story. Right. This is not gospel truth. In my opinion, there is no gospel truth. So this is something that has worked for me often. So I'm just sharing experiences in terms of how I plan my wild card and how I pretty much um, used my standard wildcard trope and pretty much went through that. I know that some people would say that this isn't fun. They might not find this style of playing wildcard fun. In that case, please play your own way. Eventually, the game is about having fun. But these are the basic principles for the wildcard that I played. Okay, so why did I go with a wildcard? And last week, if you remember, last week, probably a couple of weeks back, when we had our previous Q&A, we were talking about having the wild card, figuring out when you want to have a wild card. There was a common thing that many people mentioned, and which I kind of agree with, is that you can kind of sense when your team actually needs a full-fledged overhaul, and not just superficial band-aids, right? I agree with that. But to me, that is only one part of the whole answer. I believe the other part is about, do you know that this is the team you want to move into? Or at least nearly the team that
Yeah,
you want
that's a
to.
very important point.
Yeah? Yeah. So if you don't, hold on to your wild card. As in, you have a mess of a team right now, you'll also have a mess of a team next week, but you would actually know the team that you can move into, right? You will not jump from the frying pan to the fire and you would have lost your wild card in the meantime. One can now say, for example, a template team might arrive even before your team is disrupted. You're quite happy with your team, but you know that there is a template team in existence. In that case, hold on, let your team actually go back. Only after that, do the wild card. One can come over the other. But in my opinion, it's just my way of playing the game. Both have to be there to actually go hit a wild card. Otherwise, don't. And once I'm relatively certain of both parts, I jump. Now, say for example, if you are even if both of these things are satisfied, some people might want to hold on for a while. I don't, because I prefer to take action when you have to take action, and don't take action when you don't have to, or you're not ready to take the action. So that is pretty much how I go ahead with it. This was game week, end of game week 4 was, and you'd notice in the chat, this was around the time when I started pinging quite a few of you saying that I kind of know what team I want. That of course, I knew that my team is a little bit of a mess, but I also kind of started figuring out the team that I want. During the long international break, that kind of changed to an extent. But the basic principle I was fine with. Basic principle of what I want to move into, I was fine with. Anyway, now let's talk about what are the things that I kind of think about when I go ahead with the wildcard. First, I was pretty decisive. Game week, end of game week 4, I was pretty sure that this is the team I wanted to move into, and my team is a mess. I just hit the wildcard. I was decisive. I made the move quick. The second thing is I made it early in the week, so pretty much on Monday. I knew that my team is a mess. How different will Liverpool be? How different will Aston Villa be? Let's go hit the wild card. However, that completely changed after the 7-2. But it was not so much that everything kind of was different. But I played the wild card early. That helps in the price changes. So this makes sure that I have the people that were rising and that I wanted in my team, like Grealish, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I got them early. I got them before their price rise. And the people that I didn't want, but I knew that they have a possibility of rising twice. For example, Son, and for example, James, I pretty much got them early, and I could benefit by they rose twice, so I got a zero point 0.1 benefit overall. I do not take much stock into the international break. Some people only would wildcard during the international break because that covers 2 weeks and they have a long span in terms of rising prices, etc. I did wildcard in an international break, but in my opinion, that was just a happenstance. So now let's talk actually about my pre-wildcard team. So this is what my pre-wildcard team looked like. I could see that there are a few structural problems with this. I start my game week with a 5-3-2 or a 5-2-3 because I feel that this is the easiest team to change to morph into other teams. But by game week 4, I was pretty sure that now the time for morphing had come. You'd see that eventually the team that I moved into is not dramatically different from this team. But the benefit that I got was that I could make those multiple structural improvements in this team and could get that done. So this is at least what my pre-wildcard team looked like. And now, with the start of the wildcard, what were the things that I was thinking of? The first thing that I was thinking of at the start of the wildcard, what I did was I got in, as I mentioned, I got in Grealish before his price increase. I held on to Calvert-Lewin till pretty much I couldn't anymore. And I only got him in when his price was just about to go up. I got in Son, I got in Rodriguez, and I got in Kane as well. I had no intention of holding on to Son or Rodriguez, but I thought that both of them will have 2 price increases, and they did, and I benefited from that. Kane, I thought would also get a double price increase, and I was kind of iffy about whether I want to hold on to him. But Kane didn't get the 2 price increases, and I eventually did not hold on to Kane. I'm not very sad about it because instead of Kane, I went to Sterling, and the price difference wasn't much. So anyway, the points difference wasn't much, and in the long run, I want Sterling at a little bit over Kane. So anyway, so this was the start of the wild card, and these are the reasons that and you know what, you can see that I took Konsa and I took Chilwell. I kind of was hoping that both of them will rise twice as well, but they didn't. But that is okay. You pretty much give all of them a shot. Whichever rises twice, you get point benefits out of them. Now, after that, the actual wildcard team. Now, the decision as to how I make my wildcard team is based on what I'm most comfortable with. And this comes with years and years of actually trying, trial and error, lots of trial and error. And I had played 3-4-3 and I have played poorly. I had played 3-5-2 and I have played well. But I know that I play the best at a nominal 4-4-2. And then, say, for example, with the structure within the 4-4-2, if some things need to change, that's fine. A 4-3-3 is not very different in my book from a 4-4-2 that I have. And I'll tell you why. Because my standard 4-4-2 consists of a consistent 3 big hitters and my captain interchanging between those 3 four solid defenders, price no bar, jumping between these three value picks in attack. So there could be three midfielders. There could be two midfielders, two more midfielders in a 3-5-2. Four cannot be right in a 4-4-2 or 4-5-1, or I can even have 4-3-3. That's all okay, right? So it's just the three most value picks in the overall scheme of things. A 4-3-3 and a 4-4-2 in my book is not very different in my structure. It could be, one midfielder, two strikers. Instead, there could be two midfielders, one striker. That's completely all right. And these three slots, these three value pick slots, I keep on jumping between teams. These are the most dependent, I believe, on form and fixture. Sometimes they are like an ink season is rare. Sometimes this goes really well, sometimes it does not. So these three slots often give me 180 points each. Not one player. I keep on moving between players. So I'm getting the equivalent of 9 million forwards for the price of 6.5 million approximately each. So that is my structure. So therefore, my option one was this. This was a standard 4-3-3. You see exactly what I had mentioned earlier. There are four heavy defenders, there are four solid midfielders, and there are three very efficient forwards. Right. This was my standard 4-3-3 that I always play, and this is something that I was considering. Then we moved to my option two, which was a standard 4-4-2, right? Where we had Rodriguez and we had Maupay and Watkins. And since Rodriguez was expensive, I could actually have to, not afford Digne anymore, and I had to afford Bellerin in his place. The rest of it was pretty much what I had just now spoken about. So these were initially the two options that I was thinking of. But then at some point of time, one unfortunate thing happened, and that was right after the first, the game week got over, was when we came to know that Alisson's injury is serious and he'll be out of track for a while. And that was the point when I started thinking about not having both the Liverpool defenders, having any one. And instead, Grealish, who was having a great week, would be my replacement for Robertson. So this is also a 4-4-2, right? But it's just that instead this is not as heavy in defense. So instead of uh, a Robo, I have a Grealish now. At some point of time, I do see that to change over. But with this team, there was also another problem that happened a little bit later in the week, and that was De Bruyne's injury. Now, since De Bruyne got injured, the only other expensive midfielder that I thought could be worth it, and we were not sure about Sterling's injury as well because he had dropped out of the internationals. So this was kind of what I was, getting to. A very different 4-3-3 from what I commonly play, and that had Kane as the third expensive player. And this is, actually not very different as well. Instead of any of the City players, I had Kane as the third expensive player. And the rest of the structure you see is pretty much consistent. A standard 4-3-3 it would be. Instead, it is a instead of a midfielder, expensive midfielder, I have an expensive striker. But here, and the other problem was, of course, that Mitchell's place became a little doubtful. Eventually, once I realized that Sterling would actually be fit, at late in the day, I decided to, instead of Kane, go with Sterling, because eventually Sterling is the player I want to keep long term. So this is the team that I ended up with, and this is the team that I currently have. This is a weak 4-4-2, please realize, because since I had to afford Mane, Salah, as well as Sterling, my defense became a little weaker, right? And but then I'm happy to have Ailing and Dallas because they are so attacking. I do believe that at some point of time, both of them, will get a lot of points and not just show the form that they are showing. And Jack Robinson had a good game, even though he couldn't get a clean sheet. He got 5 points, so I'm kind of okay. Says and Alexander Arnold are both pretty much standard in my team. So this is what I eventually went with, and this was my final team. And you see that McCarthy and Forster were my goalkeepers. This is both of them are from the same team, so even if one doesn't play, the other would. So unless their game is completely cancelled, I would pretty much have a goalkeeper at all points. Gunn, as you know, has gone to another team. So eventually this week I had got 52 points. I shouldn't be very happy with this, but I am, because I see that all my expensive players, Mane, Salah, and Sterling, had got points. Maybe not exorbitant points like many others have, but they have got pretty good points as I wanted. Calvert Lewin continues to score, and my defense has not got any points, but I'm okay with that, because with defense you wait, and you wait for them to really reap big points. I'm ready. I'm ready to do that. In the long run, this is kind of what my long run team looks like. This is a very standard 4-3-3, as you can see. I have Alexander Arnold, I have Robertson, I have Sace, and I have Dallas as the defenders. It's a pretty heavy defense. I have Fernandez, Salah, and KDB actually instead of Sir Sterling in the midfield. KDB or Sterling, but for all practical purposes, KDB in midfield. Three expensive players and two fillers who play regular game time, and three forwards who I believe will be the most value picks over the course of the season. And that pretty much is the structure of my wild card. Questions, guys? Was that really rambling? Was that really boring? What do you think about it?
No, it's good. I guess my one question is, any plans for Spurs players? Because I see you didn't really mention them in your long-term team, but obviously they're in great form. So
Yeah. So I was thinking very seriously about Kane, and I continue to think very seriously about Bale, and not Son so much. Even though he's having a purple patch, not Son so much. The price point doesn't work for me, for no other reason but for the price point. It doesn't quite work for me. As in, it will be unfair for me to pick Son, who doesn't take penalties, who doesn't take any spot kick duties, and who plays for a Mourinho team, which after 2 or 3 goals just decides to pack up and expect him to score 200 plus points, because 200 plus points is the minimum which I will expect for one of my three most expensive slots. So, but Bale, yes. Kane, yes. I did not, because I have a little bit more of trust on Sterling and Mane. But Kane and Bale are both possibilities.
okay, cool. I mean, I think the Jose myth that they're like really defensive is kind of a myth, because some of the teams he's had to work with in the past, I feel like he just decided that was the best strategy for the time, not necessarily the tactic that he'll use, even with his Spurs team consistently. So, I mean, hopefully I have Son and Kane, so I hope that will be the case, and they will continue to score plenty of goals.
Yeah, no, I think so too. The only thing that I think is that, and I'll just give a difference between. So this is just my opinion, okay? It's just this is a game of opinions.
Yeah, sure.
What I feel is that for it is a Mourinho team. There's a greater chance of a Mourinho team, once he gets his defense properly set up, to score 3 goals and then decide to shut shop, because a Mourinho team is defensively generally strong enough to do that. Pep Guardiola team cannot do it. So the only solution for all practical purposes that he has is, even after scoring 2 goals, to go for the third, to go for the fourth. The same problem is there with the Brendan Rodgers team. They just go for it, go for it. You see that another strong defensive team like Liverpool often can score 3 goals, score 2 goals, and coast. So this is just an opinion. It's eventually a game of opinions, and the kind of scores that, the kind of performance that Son is showing, I think he's a great pick. It just isn't a great pick for me because the price points don't work, but he standalone is a great pick, no questions.
All right, so let's get into the first question. This one comes from Rajat Agarwal. He asks about West Ham assets. He says, I am planning to bring in West Ham assets for Game Week 8 as they have a positive fixture swing after Game Week 7. Is it advisable to bring in West Ham for Game Week 6 as they are performing well even in the tough fixtures? There are plenty of options, including Cresswell, Bowen, Souček, Antonio, and Benrahma. Who is the most valuable asset for West Ham for you? Ajit, would you like to take this one?
Hi, good evening, guys. Firstly, thanks a lot, Shom. That was fantastic. Your wild card. Thank you so much for explaining it so well.
Sure.
And the point that I really, really enjoyed was where you said the second half, where you have to be sure of the team that you like to have before you clip. And that's something that I'm struggling with, and one of the main reasons I didn't go for the wild card.
Mhm.
So coming back to Rajat's question, yes, West Ham players are doing really well. The team looks really good. I mean, they don't seem to be giving up. I don't know what happened in the first half against Spurs. Spurs are on fire. They're a different gravy. So I mean, they could do that to any team at the moment. But they did fight. They did come back, and I continue to expect them to do well. Having said that, I have noticed that West Ham assets have been losing value through these tougher fixtures, despite doing well. So, and Antonio's come down from 6.5 to 6.3. Bowen has come down as well. So, if you already have a good team and you don't have any issues or any necessity to make a change, I would not jump on to West Ham assets at the moment. I would wait for the Fulham fixture in game week 8. If not, and you do want to get one of them, then of course in the midfield, Bowen is my favorite at the moment. He's got a non-penalty XG of 1.55. He's already scored 3 goals. And of course, up front, Antonio. But Antonio has a hamstring issue at the moment. I don't know whenever he comes back. But by game week 8, I do expect him to be good. So up front, definitely Antonio would be the one that I'd look for in West Ham. So,
Right. Yeah, I would just like to say that at this point of time, West Ham does not have. So I'll just give a little bit of a situational thing, right? I agree. First of all, I do agree with everything that Ajit had said, right? It's pretty much exactly my line of thinking as well. I do believe that a few of the resources have, it's all about. It's eventually a game of price points, right?
yeah,
Antonio is a great asset at the 6.3 price point that he has.
yeah,
He'll rise up to 6.5 at any moment, and he'll do well consistently through the season. But there's a difference between having Antonio in your team and having Cresswell, right? Cresswell, his performances depend quite a lot on the kind of teams they play against, because clean sheets are rarer. So for a Cresswell, holding on till game week 8 is advisable. For a Bowen and an Antonio, if you are really really that much sold on West Ham, go ahead, do the pick. uh, I wouldn't advise for Cresswell. I would not have too many problems for Bowen or Antonio, because Antonio is one of those mid-priced midfielder forwards that I did consider. So yeah, go ahead. Ben Rama, give him a couple of game weeks perhaps.
yeah.
Let him get into some kind of form for picking him up. He's a shiny new toy, I understand, but just hold on.
He failed his medical too, so he might as well wait.
Oh, okay.
Initially, he did. But then he got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So makes
Yeah.
sense to just hold on for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think,
Yeah,
Chase?
I agree. I mean, first of all, I agree with what Ajit said. Waiting till game week 8 is what I would do. I'm not really looking at West Ham assets. I still don't fully trust them. I think the first half against Tottenham, I think things like that may happen in the future with West Ham. They're a team in great form, and they know that, but they're not like a real world-class team that can necessarily give consistent performances. And in that case, it was one half they were not great, one half they were pretty good. And really, it was just for 10 minutes there where they really scored all their goals. So I
Yeah.
don't really trust any of their assets. I mean, they're playing well as a team, but I could easily see these returns being spread out amongst some of these assets that Rajat has mentioned here. So I'm not really convinced by anyone, and I would just agree. If you're looking to bring them in, we have time to wait and see. It's not the greatest fixtures, and just bring them in for Fulham. Fulham is an amazing matchup right now.
Absolutely.
So
Very true. But by the way, Fulham's defense was not too bad this game week. But it is Fulham after all.
yes,
Adorobioyo, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, some Adorobioyo or something like that. He was very good, I thought. Yeah.
didn't Fulham play Sheffield United? So it doesn't count. If
Yeah.
you a clean
Fair
sheet,
enough.
yeah, they can't
Well,
score.
cannot. Well, I take back all that I said. Fair enough.
So moving on to question 2, also from Rajat. Now, this is a question that we seem to have been asked a lot. It's about sort of the mid-price midfielders. So if you ask this question, considering your question answered, it's about Grealish, Zaha, Foden, people in that price range. Maybe down to a Trossard, but for him, it's just about the Grealish versus Zaha versus Foden. He asks, who do we expect to get the most returns from them among game week 6 to 10? Zaha's a talisman. Foden is usually playing in the front three, and then there's Pep Roulette, so you got to take that in consideration. And Grealish is great form. He's also the talisman of Aston Villa. So I'll go to Sham. What do you think of sort of these mid-price midfielders?
So of the three, I went through this because I was thinking of getting a mid-price midfielder as well. I eventually went with Grealish. So for selfish reasons, Grealish would be my pick of the three. And that is because he's pretty much the creative hub of Villa. And Villa has a good striker at this moment who hasn't performed really to his absolute peak potential except for the Liverpool game. But I believe that Watkins is a very good striker. Plus his attacking, it's not just Grealish that other teams need to defend against anymore. So Grealish will have a little bit more of chance to spread his legs and actually, spread his wings rather, spread his legs.
Oh my.
Spread his wings. We have to cancel that. We have to beep it out or something, right?
It made, for some reason, it made perfect sense to me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
I think we should just leave this in.
We should just leave this in.
Just for clarification purposes,
oh my God,
this video is not calling Jack Grealish a homosexual. Okay.
Okay. So okay, Grealish. Okay, we'll do some. We'd like to assume that he'll do well. And in comparison to Zaha, who is stuck with that problem. The rest of their team is, barely Premier League standard. So you can, the teams, as you've kind of noticed, pretty much double up and triple up on Zaha. And that is something that he's been feeling for the last season and a half. And his performance has come down a little bit, even though he is on penalties. So there is a possibility that Zaha will continue to get points, and Crystal Palace somehow managed to get all the weirdest penalties that you can ever think of, which they did this week as well. But so that is the reason why Grealish over Zaha, and Foden for all the current reasons. Foden can really explode and be a fantastic FPL asset, but again, he hasn't yet. So probably it makes sense for Foden to start, even though he plays for Man City, even though he's like the next big British hope. We can probably just give him a little bit of time to start performing to that FPL level before we start picking him. So my rating for those three would be Grealish, Zaha, and then Foden.
Yeah, I agree. I think Grealish is the best. And I think one reason for this is I'm becoming more and more convinced that Crystal Palace aren't good at scoring goals. They got a really lucky goal last game, but I just watched them and I think I don't really see where the creativity comes from besides Zaha. Eze hasn't looked amazing in my opinion, and they didn't start him last game. But when I look at their midfield, it's just not the same. Aston Villa now have, like you said, a better striker. They also have Ross Barkley. And while a lot of people may not like him, he's better than a lot of the Crystal Palace players. So I would just rather have the talisman of Villa over Crystal Palace. So that's that for me. And Foden, I think I just agree with what you said exactly. Ajit, anything to add?
Nothing really. I have Foden myself, so I've been pretty happy with him. I know there's rotation risk. I know he could have had a really big game in the last one. some really good saves by the goalkeeper. But as things stand today, of course, I completely agree that Grealish would be my number one pick over Foden. Um, Also because Aston Villa just look like a much better unit than City for whatever reason at the moment. Their fixtures are fantastic, and I still I'm left wanting a lot more from the City that I expect before I can sell Foden to someone else. As for Zaha, I clearly don't want anyone from Crystal Palace. Their XG is 4.8. That's less than a goal a game with penalties and only seven big chances, which is right down the ladder. I mean, amongst all the teams. So, yeah, he's given you returns. He's done well, but for me, it's Grealish. If you can do more with the extra .6, then Foden still remains a good bet.
Yeah. And I kind of agree to that as well. As in, if you have Foden, I do not find a reason to, go for the transfer. A transfer is expensive, and Foden could turn out to be very good.
But as the way things stand today, no doubt Grealish would be the pick for sure.
All right, so moving on to Mohit B's question. He asks, Son versus Bruno versus Barnes. He says he plans to get Son into his team, and the player to make way would be either Bruno or Barnes. He says he would prefer to remove Barnes, but another move may require some cash in the bank. What's the outlook on Bruno for the next 3 games? And is it worth it to replace him with Son after a hit? I'm going to start off by saying I don't think I could make this move myself personally. Son plays Burnley away, and I think Burnley have been okay defensively. And it's a tough one because I know it's frustrating just seeing Son bang in the goals and assists and points. But, Bruno's got a solid chance of getting points. You probably have somewhere else to make the transfer. But if you really, sort of ended up making the transfer and just sort of said, whatever, I'm just going to take the chance, I would kind of understand it as well. So I don't think you can go wrong either way. It's hard to just, sort of magically predict what's going to happen next with a lot of the big players. So I think in terms of Bruno getting rid of him, I don't necessarily think it's worth it. Barnes is just not an option at all for me. So there's that. Leicester have Europa League. They haven't looked good in general, and now they have a lot of injuries. Well, they did look good, but looking back on it, I'm like, okay, they probably just had a bunch of easy matchups. So now without Vardy, I really don't like Barnes at all when you have people like Grealish in there. So, Sham, anything to add to this? He's got a lot more questions here.
No, I do not. I am not a subscriber to getting rid of Bruno at all. Manchester United will get penalties, and Bruno has already got his miss for the season. So he will keep on scoring penalties. And you know what? You'd notice that in the last match, Bruno even got a non-penalty goal, which eventually got disallowed, but he's a good pick. I have considered Bruno consistently, and I do not find a good reason why one should change Bruno to Son. I feel that's at best a sideways move, and I don't think it's worth it. Barnes, yes, if you can, go ahead, change Barnes to Son, and get the price from somewhere else, not from Bruno.
Exactly. Yes, I
agree. I'm pretty much on the same page as you are.
All right, so moving on to the next question. Jimenez versus Kane. Ajit, what do you think about Jimenez and Kane? What's the outlook on Kane until game week 8?
Wolves just haven't been the same attacking unit this season as yet. Yesterday, for the first time, we saw them being the defensive unit they were, but attacking is still, they're leaving a lot. So I just wanted to share some stuff. They've had only 7 big chances, which is less than 2 big chances a game as compared to a Spurs 20 big chances. All right. And out of those 20 big chances, Tottenham has converted 12. So even their conversion is really, really good. And so if I could move from Jimenez to Kane, I'd do it. Another reason I'd like to do it is because I feel Kane's ceiling is much, much higher. And I do see a lot of people captaining Kane going forward over the next few fixtures till game week 8. So if I could move from Jimenez to Kane and I had no other problem in my team, I'd do that change.
Sham?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I'm completely in agreement with what Ajit said. In comparison, between the two of them, Kane is a no-brainer. He is really, for all practical purposes, seems like uh, back to his best. And you know what? Come to think of it, what I was just discussing about with you, Chase, with Mourinho's teams, you kind of think that they probably will shut shop after they score one goal. uh, Jimenez never gets more than that. I mean, never gets more than one. And with the upside that Kane offers, Kane is definitely a better.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you said Kane of the old because I've played FPL for 2 years, and when I came in, Kane was one of the first few people I wanted in my team. In fact, I owned Kane and Son when they beat Everton 6-1, if I remember correctly, like 2 seasons back. And then suddenly he just fell off a cliff, and I couldn't understand it. Everyone else.
Where does that come from? Yeah.
So yes, definitely seeing Kane like this is very, very refreshing, and yeah, I mean, if you can get him, you should get him. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at like Jimenez to Kane for -4, it's a tough one because Wolves have good fixtures. In general, I don't like getting rid of what I would consider a good player ahead of a good fixture, but at the same time, you generally don't see players putting up the sort of amount of shots and just the FPL points that Kane is getting right now. So again, I think this is one where either way you could justify it. But I think you could be missing out on just the big hauls if you don't go for Kane. So I think that's the way I would be leaning. But Jimenez, he has goal potential, but I think like y'all said, it's just not the high upside. So I think a -4 in this case could be worth it. And I also had Kane and Son that season that Ajit's talking about, and I got on them early, and that was the season I finished 50th, and I feel like they were like a, I don't know, a 20% factor in that because I just rode them every week and it was just amazing. So yes, I'm glad to have both of them again. Just feels great.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah.
So Mark asks about, well, he's in the process of ironing out a plan for his team. He's got some ideas of going from Doherty to Seiss, Jimenez to Brewster, Vardy to Kane, and Poveda to Mane. Now, Poveda is just one of his bench players. But his questions about this are, is it a good plan, idea for the season? Is there any suggestions or routes that would make this a better team that would yield a lot more points throughout? So he's got a lot going on here, but what do we think about sort of going from Jimenez to Brewster and then Poveda to Mane? Because I feel like that's sort of where the big money change is here. He's a real shift in structure.
Yeah, correct. So I was going through this as well, and I kind of agree. The real move over here is Jimenez to Mane. What he's basically doing is that he's moving Jimenez to Mane, and that's a good move.
Yeah.
So Vardy to Kane, great, is a fine move at this moment. Kane at his peak can probably do everything that Vardy can do, and a little bit more. So yeah, in terms of FPL points. So Vardy to Kane is a good move. Jimenez to Mane is a good move. Doherty to Seiss is probably not, the positives that you get out of Jimenez to Mane and Vardy to Kane. I think a Doherty to Seiss is worth the expenditure. Doherty at peak, Doherty is the same as Digne, right? So Digne to Seiss, the drop that you have, that drop is worth Jimenez to Mane plus Vardy to Kane. That's kind of how I make the overall math of this situation.
Ajit?
No, I don't want to dilute anything you guys said. That's exactly how I would have explained it. I agree with all the moves on this. I've had Seiss from the start rather than Doherty, and it's one of the decisions I was really perplexed with at the start of the season, and I'm glad I kept Seiss. He's the highest scoring defender over the last 5 game weeks, and I continue to believe that till game week 8 or 9 that he should give us at least another 2 or 3 goals.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he seems to be in a sort of a tough situation, but I think that's a decent start. I think getting rid of Doherty is great as well. He's not nailed on at all. So moving to the next question, we've got Pritesh who asks, Who's the best fifth sub 5.5 midfielder option for regular starts and some returns for a longer run from now? So we talked about the slightly more expensive midfielder options, but this is getting to in that little cheaper bracket down there. Ajit, what do you think about this price bracket?
I actually really like McGinn. I mean, we've covered everything about Aston Villa, and McGinn is right in there. He's ticking away, and let me just bring up some statistics. He's in a winning team. They're clicking. The guy plays 90 minutes every match. Unlike Trezeguet, who's playing more of, let's say, a blocker who puts his legs in just to stop the move. I don't see McGinn doing that. He's more on the offensive side of the team, unlike Trezeguet. So I definitely see a lot of. So he doesn't have much. He's already scored one goal, McGinn. But I definitely see him get a lot of more assists going forward. So if you were to keep him between game week 6 and game week 15, where I do see very, very good fixtures for Aston Villa, I definitely see that McGinn could give you that possibly 4+ points on an average over those game weeks, which I would be very happy with a 5.5 midfielder.
Sham?
I have just 3 names, and I am pretty much in agreement with the suggestion that Ajit gave. I have had McGinn previously. I had McGinn last season as well. McGinn is a good suggestion. The only 3 other players that I might just mention are Souček, Klich, and Bamford. These are players that one could also consider. Souček, Klich is an interesting proposition because is an interesting proposition because he takes penalties as well. For a team like Leeds, who I would like to believe will get some quite a few penalties at the end of it. They are kind of the team with really pacey wingers and things like that. It's a possibility that he'll have quite a few penalties. And sorry, I said Bamford. That was wrong. What I meant was Harrison. Harrison is there is a kind of a telepathic movement between Harrison and Bamford, where Harrison crosses exactly to the point where Bamford heads it in. We had seen it a few times in Championship as well. That's a possibility. Souček is such an advanced kind of advanced midfielder that there are possibilities there as well. Also, McGinn, cannot go very wrong with McGinn. He's even with everything there, I see that McGinn is a very good enabler, and I see that with Aston Villa becoming a better attacking unit, McGinn is also a very good possibility. So that's about that. And also, if you have a little bit more of money in hand, if you can just maybe manufacture 0.7 from somewhere, Jared Bowen from West Ham is a consideration as well.
So moving on to his next question, which is, with Virgil van Dijk injured, should we still own Liverpool defensive assets? If yes, which one and why? So I would say Van Dijk hasn't been like super amazing these last couple of weeks or months, so it's still a loss. It still hurts the team. I think it's reasonable to go with one for now. Like, if you already have one, especially, I would keep them. I think the best option is Robertson. I think most people will agree with that. He's just been getting forward more. Trent hasn't been putting in as many crosses as he typically does. And Robertson has more FPL points so far. I don't think that Van Dijk missing necessarily has such a big impact as Alisson missing does. And that's not to say that Van Dijk doesn't make a big impact, but the drop down from Alisson to Adrian is just so huge, and I think it impacts the whole team's confidence. So in general, I don't really expect them to keep a lot of clean sheets, but I wouldn't. If I was wildcarding, I can't say that I would 100% get a Liverpool defender. It's not like old times. It's more of like an actual debate now. Like, okay, it's not like, do I have 1 or 2 Liverpool? It's, do I have 0 or 1? So I think that's the question, and I think you sort of have to look at him like, oh, let's look at them as another midfielder because they'll get assists. but I think with all the goals flying in right now, you could easily go without one. So Ajit, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've said. Van Dijk hasn't really been the wall that he was, let's say, 6 months back, and Liverpool have been conceding a lot. So him being there or not being there is pretty much inconsequential when I'm thinking in FPL terms. Yes, I do have Trent, and I wish I had Robo. So I agree there as well. But I'm not going to make that shift. I just feel like whenever Trent does get his points, he will. And I also agree that I'm not going to be doubling up on them anytime soon, till Allison is back at least. But having said that, and having played football myself at at various levels in my life, I know the way teams function. So now they know that there is a gaping hole in their defense. So Liverpool is going to work a lot harder in their defense than they have been previously over the last 6 months. So to write off Liverpool defensively would be very, very naive. I think Fabinho can enter VVD's role very, very well on the defensive side, not so much on the offensive side, again, as an FPL asset or for Liverpool for that matter. So I will be holding on to my Liverpool asset. I continue to believe that they will give us 10 plus clean sheets, which is my bare minimum for any of my defensive long-term assets. And yes, if I was on my wild card, I'll be getting Robo in, similar to the Foden Grealish question. So, but since I have TA, I'm going to be sticking with it.
Sean?
Sure. So I kind of agree with both of you. Okay? At this point of time, Allison is a big factor, and that is the reason why I do not have both. I'm very happy to have both TAA and Robertson, but I'm very happy to not have both and only have TAA. I had to choose between one or the other. I chose TAA. I would have probably right now I would have probably chosen Robertson, but hey, you cannot have your cake and eat it too, right? So Allison is a factor. After Allison comes in, my long-term team, as you have noticed, has Robo and TAA both, and I'll have that once Allison is back. Last season they got 14 clean sheets. That wasn't the best. They Liverpool isn't the team of 2 seasons back where they used to get 20 clean sheets or so. Last season they got 14 clean sheets. That was very good, but not peak. And this season, how much lesser will they get? They'll get 11, they'll get 12. That's okay, because eventually Robo and TAA, what they contribute is in terms of goals and assists, right? That is the what should you say? That is the plus plus. That is the reason why they cost so much.
Yeah.
And I do not believe that their goals and assists are coming down or something. So they are good picks even now, and they aren't, of course, considering BVD. But without Allison, it is a little more iffy. That's the reason I have only one.
All right, so moving on to Vasa Gold's question. He asks, if you are looking to climb up the ranks in the millions right now, that's where he's ranked, do you get Rodriguez 40% owned or go with Zaha, who's 18.9% owned? He already has Grealish. Sham, what do you think about this?
Your ranks don't matter right now.
Exactly.
Your ranks will only start mattering after now this might sound like bragging, okay, so please forgive me. Last season in game week 9 I was at 1 million plus. I ended up at 222nd. So your rank at this point doesn't matter. Relax. However, now coming back to your question, do you go with Rodriguez or go with Zaha? At this moment, I'll go with Rodriguez.
Yeah, I really think the answer is obvious. Like, he knows that James is a better option, but he's like, oh, Zaha is less owned. I want to take risks, and I feel like you can get in a lot of trouble, and that's where your rank really starts to get damaged. But if you have reasons for thinking that Zaha may actually be a better option, then for sure state those reasons. But you got to make sure you're making an honest decision and not a ownership based decision. And I feel like the community in general promotes the idea of ownership based decisions too much. And I will just restate what Sham said again, just for the purpose of people that are in this situation. game week 10, I was 1 million plus last season. I ended up 14K, I believe. So, you can at least, bounce back and have a solid season. Ajit, anything to add to this?
Nothing at all. Whatever it is, I won't. I don't even know why we're discussing this, to be honest. Is
Yeah.
that he knows it. I mean, he's just looking for a reason, I guess, to be a little different.
Mhm.
But we've
You know what?
discussed in length that the template is still forming, and
Yeah.
like we've discussed, like Shom stated, and even in our pragmatic strategy report, which is spearheaded by Shom, um, I think the easiest way to get into the top 100K over the next, let's say, 10 to 15 game weeks is to go with those template players. They're becoming template for a reason, and like Chase just said, you can end up doing a lot more harm to yourself going differential unnecessarily.
Can I, with Chase's permission, share my screen just once?
Oh, yes, yes.
Let me do that. There is just one thing that I have to show you. Take a screenshot of this and keep it.
All right, wait, I'm going to make this full screen.
Yeah.
And there you go. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, it's like pretty much a year-long competition. So just keep that in mind. And really, differentials sort of build up over the course of a season. Eventually, you'll stumble across a player where you actually believe they're going to score a lot of points, and they'll also happen to be a differential pick. Sort of like I have Trossard in my team right now. I brought him in a couple weeks back, and he's a big differential. But I got him in, and I was trying to make sure I got him in for the right reasons and all that. But I feel like those will sort of come along, and he's been okay. He's got me one return and one blank, but I feel like those will come along. So yeah, just be patient. And hopefully you can get back up in the ranks. And a 1 million start is not that bad. I know a lot of people that have much worse starts. Like he says he's in the millions. I don't know exactly where he's at, but there are plenty of people down there that will end up with very solid ranks. So moving on to Shravan's question, he asks about Big at the Back. Is it officially the end of Big at the Back? There are a lot of goals flying in right now. Ajit, what would you think about this?
No, I mean, I still feel it depends. Well, what you think big at the back is. So apart from the Liverpool boys, no one else costs 7+ million, 6.5 million. So I'm seeing a lot of value in the 5.5 bracket. You see Castagna, you see Saez, you see even Cody, for that matter, who doesn't have much attacking returns at all. All of them are giving you returns. Cresswell's at 5 million, who's also given you very decent returns. Regulian from Spurs is looking really good. He got his first assist with Kane in the last game, and Telles hasn't even started playing for Manchester United as yet. So Digne has been playing well for Everton as well. Keane at 5 million has got you 2 goals. Despite no clean sheets, he's returning for you. So no, I wouldn't want to go completely cheap. Yes, you have your Kilmans and all who are coming up now, and I'm still not very sure of handicapping my team with a 4 million defender at the moment. There's a reason I went with these 5 to 5.5 million defenders. I feel they provide very good value in the short and the long term, and nothing has changed as of now.
Sean?
Yeah, well, I'll just give one small little caveat information. In the last season, this pretty much was the same discussion that we had at the start because Liverpool was not getting their clean sheets, and neither was City. So we had the same discussion last season. In the first 15 game weeks, Liverpool got 2 clean sheets. And then in the next, from game week 16 to game week 26, they probably got around 10 clean sheets in 11 or 12 or something like that. So things change very quickly in Premier League. Um, City ended up with 17 clean sheets at the end of the season. That was the
Yes.
highest.
Yes.
So it's there is a lot to unravel in this season. You cannot blanket say that something is finished or something is not. The 5.5 defenders, some of them are really good. The 5.5 Reguilon, as he mentioned, is something that someone that I'm looking closely as well at. There's a lot to unravel in this season. We don't know too much about this season yet. We cannot blanket say anything. We shall wait and see. What do you say, Chase?
Um, I agree with what you said. I think if you have them, you probably have a bigger transfer to make than to get rid of Trent Alexander-Arnold, which is the situation that a lot of us are in. If you're wildcarding, then I understand you have a decision to make. With a big defender, you may just want to go, a bunch of cheap ones, maybe a mid-price one, and put all the money in attack. I could see myself doing that on wild card, but in terms of using transfers to get rid of big at the back, especially regarding Liverpool, we've seen this before, and they can do well in the future. Um, so, two more questions. One about Chelsea, but before we go there, and we got a lot of questions about Chelsea, actually, in these final couple ones, so we'll just sort of sum it all up. But we've got a wild carding question. So, is there any advantage of holding on to the wild card until December or around that, is what Karthik asks. So, Sham, what do you think about holding the wild card until basically as late as you can?
Well, you know what? It doesn't matter. You, in my opinion, it doesn't matter at all. Sometimes you make an early wild card. To me, wild cards are to improve your team and not to implement some kind of a specific strategy. I had done this. My worst season was 18-19. I had got worse ranks, but for different reasons, I let go of a game, let go of a season mid season, etc. Family, somebody was ill. Lot of jazz. My worst season, full stop, playing full seriousness, was 18-19. I finished at around 97k on, and there I held on to my wild card till December, till mid December. So probably I went for 17th or 18th game week. I had a few chances of making my wild card earlier, but instead I took 8.8, or I'm pretty good at juggling pieces around, make a reasonable team nonetheless. Eventually, I was on game week 18. I was like something like 1.5 million and had my wild card in hand. So I played my wild card pretty quickly, improved my rank, but eventually it was didn't help me a lot. So I believe that if you really feel that your team needs an overhaul, don't put a band-aid. But on the other hand, if your team doesn't need an overhaul, then keep on with it. As in, don't change something that's going good. So in my opinion, it doesn't matter.
G?
No, I agree with what Shom said. It doesn't matter. But I also agree with what Shom said, that you have to be very sure of the team that you want when you trigger that wildcard, before you trigger that wildcard. And the reason I haven't triggered my wildcard, and A is, of course, I'm happy with my team. I do have that big question mark with KDB in there. But I wouldn't know what to do with my wildcard at the moment. I know there is a template forming. I know there are fantastic players that I don't have, which I'd love to have. But would I love to have them after the next 3 or 4 game weeks? Or do I see any potential of my wildcard today? No, I don't personally see that. And that's why I'm holding on to it. I am not holding on to it because I have decided that only in game week 15 I will trigger it. So I'm staying nibble, and whenever I do feel I need to hit it, I will do it.
That's a very nice point. I like it. How about you, Chase?
Well, I agree. I think that it really just depends on your team and when you feel poorly about it. In terms of if there's any general advantage of playing it later, there was some speculation at the beginning of the season that like we would know like blanks by the time where we still have our first wild card, like those first couple of weeks or the last couple of weeks. But I don't think that's going to be the case from what I've seen recently. I think that it won't be like, oh, I can use my wild card the final week that the first wild card's available and I'll know when the blanks are. And I'll also say that in general, even with wildcards, it's tough to deal with the blanks. I mean, it doesn't really work out perfectly in the same way that wildcarding is never a perfect thing. It's never like, okay, time to get 15 new players because all my players suck. It's never a straight cut thing. Wildcards are never like this perfect tool where all of a sudden you have a garbage team, because you're never really going to end up with a garbage team. Like if you're managing your team solidly, you'll always be like, I have these players that I'm going to keep anyway. I don't really need a wild card. So it's just a vague thing where you just the presentation that Sham did earlier basically depicted it as best as possible, and there's no advantage to playing it earlier or later. So the final question is about Chelsea assets. So let's talk about Werner and Pulisic especially. If you had Pulisic, would you keep him? And if you had Werner, or if you didn't have Werner, are we looking at him as a transfer target? Which one's the better option of these two? Obviously, Werner does cost more, but what do we think about Chelsea as a whole? They finally had one good performance in terms of Werner looking good at center striker. We don't have a large sample size, and it was an easy matchup. Do we expect this to sort of represent more things to come, or is this just sort of representative of just the good matchup? Ajit, what do you think about Chelsea?
They looked much better in the last game against Southampton. I really like them. Werner, of course, there's no surprise. The minute I sold him, he scored a brace and got an assist as well. So, no, we were always expecting good stuff from Werner. I think that's what you saw. It was just a moment. It was just about, just getting him started. But I was most impressed with Havertz. His movement, the positioning he was getting into, the amount he was running, his sprints. I'm very impressed. And, in my report that I wrote in between the international break, I was very much looking at Pulisic coming in. But if I do have that spare 0.1, I definitely feel we're going to have a lot of goals from Chelsea and we should get some cover. But again, I'm still not 100% sure of which asset to get, and that is why I'm waiting. I am most impressed, and now within the mids, if I had to choose, I would have Havertz first, Pulisic second, Mount third, and then Ziyech. And between Werner and Kane, I'd have Kane. But if I could have both Werner and Kane, then that's something I'd definitely do as well. What do you think, Shom?
You know what? I do not have an opinion here. I hadn't watched the match. I hadn't watched the Chelsea match. So I'll drop it. I'll wait to watch the next match and then I'll comment more on that. Chase, you?
I didn't watch the whole thing either, but I will say, because I think Pulisic's first game back, it's going to be important for me to look at him and really see how he did. So I can't really comment too much on him, but I think Werner in the middle, from what I saw, it's just much better. But we got to remember that, for me, it's still a wait and see. There's so many good options out there right now. After one good matchup, I think they'll continue to get goals. I'm just unsure about where exactly they'll come from. I think the most trustworthy is Werner because he's not coming back from injury, and he's a center striker. So for me, if I had to go for just one, it'd be Werner. And if I had Pulisic, I would probably keep him, though. I don't think I'd sell him just yet.
Not at all.
So that concludes the Q&A for Game Week 6. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just say one other small thing? It's that it's with Spurs as well as with Chelsea. Generally, if, again, trend, I'd seen that mostly with teams like them who are attacking really well, but whose defense is really porous, at some point of time within the season, one or the other thing happens. Either their defense goes stronger or their attack gets worse, right? This wouldn't continue. At some point of time, they'll become their defense will get tighter and they'll become a really top 3 contender, or their attack will also get worse and they will kind of become mid-table, like what happened with Unai Emery's Arsenal. That is kind of what I feel. Sorry for kind of chipping in there.
No, it's all good. I'm not really sure what to expect from a lot of teams right now. I think that's why I haven't wildcarded, even if I my team was struggling, I think I would keep it. Sort of like Ajit said, there's not too much confidence right now in terms of where I'd really go and where teams are headed. But I think we can trust Everton. That's my bold take. I think Everton, I think they'll be probably top 5 this season at least. So yes, that concludes the Q&A portion. Any final comments you guys would like to make?
I think thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you guys soon.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't make decisions
really
based off of ownership. I think not yet. Maybe final 5-10 weeks. It's just not the time yet. I think that's a big point to make. So yes, thanks for joining me, guys. Glad we could do it. Hopefully you guys have a good game week 6, just not as good as mine, of course. And I will see you next time.